Hey everyone, and welcome back to the SalesDads podcast. Today I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Tyler Werrick. I've known Tyler since our early 20s when we first started out in college admissions together, where we both had a similar territory in the state of Georgia, recruiting high school students to the different schools that we represented. Tyler's probably one of the more comical people that I have ever met, definitely filled with a lot of energy and someone that is truly a natural salesman. You know, he started out in the admissions industry and later made the transition into a human capital management company where he took a fairly raw territory and developed it into a multiple referral partner, later getting himself into multiple president's clubs himself within that organization. Tyler is a recent father. He has a 1-year-old at home with his wife, and he's currently making a transition from one organization into his kind of next career field as he decides to kind of start some things on his own. In this episode, I think you're going to hear a lot about the ability to connect with people. I think you're going to learn a lot about the value that having a background outside of a sales defined role can bring to an industry. We talk a lot about our prior experiences as admissions officers and the success that has allowed us to have in handling certain types of conflict in a sales role. So Tyler's just, I think, a wealth of knowledge. I think he will be someone that most people love kind of hearing a little bit of his personal story on and just his motivation, his approach. Definitely somebody that I think if you're looking to hire someone to lead your sales team, or maybe you're looking to bring in a consultant to talk about developing a better connection with potential clients in a pretty short-term time frame, Tyler would be the individual to reach out to. During this episode, you're going to hear a kind of a unique story that's kind of passed around between some of our friends over the years and also been passed around in some of the admissions industry for people that knew us back then. But there was a very unique event that occurred when we were both still in our early careers. And we get into that and kind of illustrate how being able to build relationships can lead you into the most unique or uncomfortable situations, depending upon how you look at it. But please be sure to send me DMs or send me text messages if you know me personally. Would love to answer any questions you might have. Please, of course, reach out to Tyler. His contact information will be in the podcast itself. And, if you're getting something out of this, I would appreciate you sharing this. You don't have to subscribe, but I would appreciate you sharing this. Maybe there are other people out there that might hear from some of the things that we talk about going through, both as career specialists in sales, also as fathers. We're all going through something in our career fields and as parents, and I think it's good to create that community conversation so you're not alone. But send people this way that need to hear this. We look forward to talking to you in the future. And as always, thanks so much for your time. Hey, welcome back to Sales Dads. My name is Mac. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by a very good friend of mine, Tyler Werrick. I have known Tyler since we were probably 22, 23 years of age, as we were both starting our careers out in the admissions world, where we were representing different universities and traveling the recruitment cycle in different associated territories. And through that time together, Tyler and I have developed a lifetime friendship. We've both transitioned into technical full-time sales roles, even though collegiate admissions is very much a sales role based upon having a travel territory and certain, aspects that we have to maintain in terms of performance standards and growth standards. So I'm very excited to kind of share Tyler's story with you today, talk about his growth, both from the admissions perspective into a dedicated sales role and kind of what he's doing now as he has welcomed his first child into the world. So Tyler, first and foremost, man, thank you for taking the time and excited for you to be here.
Dude, this is a long time coming. As once you started this whole venture off, and I'm excited about it now. I mean, this might be a hairy conversation today, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I was telling her that you were coming on this week, and she goes, "You're not going to talk about Jacksonville, are you?" And it's like, we're going to talk about Jacksonville.
100%. Yeah.
So Tyler and I had a very unique event, which we'll at some point get into, that transpired during a very unique recruitment trip down to Jacksonville, Florida. But to kind of kick things off, brother, I mean, you were at what was Georgia Regent. Before that, it was Augusta State, and that's where you played baseball, correct?
No sports.
No
I
sports.
I was more of a intramural sport guy.
Okay.
I think I took ultimate frisbee 7 times while I was there. But so yeah, Augusta State, then Georgia Regents, now Augusta University.
They've
Did
renamed
undergrad.
it?
Yeah. Augusta University was the final name, which
Okay.
is good. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, it sounds way better than the middle one. But so I think it was probably week 2 on the job of taking that recruitment position that they announced the consolidation of the state of Georgia's only public medical school, only dental school, health science programs to this undergraduate campus that had been kind of like the woo hoo da fancy free life, like very chill, very relaxed. And it was an interesting transition because there was a stint of that recruitment season where there was no name announced, then it was the GRU name, I mean, it was a really entertaining time. Lack of branding while you're selling really actually lets you sell based upon the benefits, which I think is great. Like that's ultimately solution selling. That's what we do. So yes, it was an entertaining job to say the least, and there's some pretty cool travel as well along the
Did
way.
you when you first started working in admissions, did you guys have an established kind of onboarding process, or did you just kind of get your feet dumped in the fire immediately?
Dude, it was so onboarding from my standpoint was really the associate director of admissions was the one who basically wrote how the recruitment process was going to look like based upon UGA and some of the other larger institutions, just based on what they did. He basically was like, hey man, everything they do we're going to do, case copy and steal everything, right? Like, so it's 100% what he took into account, built out what the process was. Day one, when you got there, you were given your pop-up banner and your flip open bag that had your business cards and all your pamphlets in it. And it was, hey, these are the, I mean, kind of similarly into other sales roles other sales roles I later had. Here are the schools you need to go to. This is your territory. Here are the schools you need to go to. Fill in the gaps. So
Prospecting.
while it was like somewhat of a structure, similarly to my time in HCM, like it was completely like do what you want,
Mhm.
create the relationships you want. I went to high schools that no one went to, and like converted 2,000% applicant and enrollment at some of those schools, just like humped it hard, got them moving, got them turned on to it. And then they're like still feeding kids down from some of those schools throughout the state. But as far as, yeah, like a structure, it was semi there, but really kind of so new that it was, I mean, I had to kind of establish my whole line of thought and bread route and whatnot through it all at all. So it's a good time.
Just hit the ground running and make it
Yeah.
happen, right? So I
Similarly to yours, right? Or like what? I
I
mean,
I mean,
or was it?
when I was at UGA, so I
Yeah.
haven't even talked about my admissions background yet on
Yeah.
the podcast.
See,
So I was an
let's get the
admissions
skeletons
officer.
out.
Yeah, I was an admissions officer at University of Georgia to start my career, and then I went to Vanderbilt, and that's kind of why I'm wearing the Vanderbilt logo today, is because that's where I was when I met you. But yeah, I mean, at UGA, there was a tiny bit of an onboarding process, but when I was at Vanderbilt, there was a very very streamlined process, and it was a good thing for sure. But yeah, I mean, I definitely felt like when I started at UGA, great school, but definitely was in some, very large scale programs and events right out of the gate. My first, month on the job, that I just felt that I didn't have enough information and preparedness for. But
Yeah,
it
I
comes
was
with the
about to say,
territory, to say the least.
like the scariest thing in the entire world. People have a fear of speaking. Like, I mean, some people have a fear of speaking. Try like within your first few months, you having to speak in front of like 1,000 students at like a welcome day or something. Like it's like the most terrifying thing in the entire world. Like screw the 20-man info session. Like 1,000 plus people that are all just like listening to every word and every and every that you say. It
Exactly.
can really it can make your skin crawl. But for sure, it was a sales role. Like back to your point, like I
Mhm.
think about it all the time. It was a sales role that didn't pay you for going above and beyond.
Shit.
So you could, yeah, you could run circles around the dude next to you, have
Mhm.
way more applicants, way more enrollment, way more things that you're just doing, and like you get paid the same thing. And it's like, this doesn't make any sense. It's like, what is this? Huh? Like
Yeah.
this does not what it should be. So yeah, I mean, great experience though, I think for later in life with all of us, but definitely was like a, oh shit, this is an interesting job to start off.
Well, and I think for me, something that you and I have always really, I mean, not to just reward myself and and you here just because of a good friendship, but we've both been very good at relationships. I mean, I think we naturally both connect with people, and I think we're able to find a level with anyone we really talk with, and I think that's what's
Hmm.
made us both successful, both in admissions and in a dedicated sales role. However, what was funny for me is I before I found a dedicated sales position after Vanderbilt. What was interesting is I struggled for years applying to sales roles, and frankly, nobody would give me the time of day because they said you don't have sales experience. And in my mind, I'm trying to show them I have a market, I have a territory, I have performance metrics, all these things that you have. And I'm selling a product. I'm selling a $70,000 education per year.
Hmm.
Now it's $80,000 per year. And did you? I mean, for me, that was very challenging to overcome and get people to kind of be aware of. Did When you made the transition out of working for Augusta University, did you encounter that kind of transitionary issue, or how? What did you do essentially when you made that initial
So
transmission?
yeah, so like my shit, it's all jacked up. So like, all right, get this, right? So I take on a new role. They oh gosh, what's the word? They reorged the entire admissions office. So we basically had to
Really?
reapply for our positions. I was like, I'm not doing recruitment anymore. I took an operations position where I oversaw just the duties as required position, like everything that no one wanted to deal with, reading international languages to understand whether or not a high school like this kid from Transylvania has like an actual high school diploma. Like that was my job towards the end, and I'm finishing up grad school probably, I don't know, 2 months out from finishing up 2015. A friend of mine reaches out on Facebook, was like, hey, there's this sales role. It's open in Augusta, for this human capital management company. Like, it's selling payroll, selling HR services, selling all that stuff. Like, I think you would be great on it. Ignored her. I was like, whatever, man. Like, I need to like finish my degree. Life is good where I'm at. I don't need to like rock the boat or anything, whatever at that point. She hits me up again, and I had like an awful day at work that day. Like, just like everything was just like punching me in the face and kicking me. So I was just like, you know what, screw it. Like, let's have this combo. I had one call with the who eventually would be my sales executive, the lady that would end up being my sales executive. One call with a recruiter, one call again with the sales executive. And oppositely to your point, she looked at me and was like, hey, you're not green. Like, how to sell something and how to build something. You just have never been compensated to do it. So, like, I actually never met her face to face until my first day of the job. I never applied to the job, never had to do anything. They offered me the job on the phone. And I was sitting here like, yeah, sure, sounds good, and then they're like, hey, can you be in Atlanta at 8 a.m. the following Monday? I'm like, 8 a.m. in Atlanta? Like, so I was like up at like 3:30, 4 o'clock, wigging out because I'm like, dude, Atlanta, traveling from here, it's about 2.5 to 3 hours.
Because you're
And
actually
just,
in Augusta.
oh yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
Augusta. Yeah. And so, you know, if you leave 15 minutes too late going to Atlanta from Augusta or vice versa coming home, you might add another hour or so onto your trip. So like I'm hauling ass that morning, get there completely sleep deprived. It's like you get your badge picture taken, you get your computer, you get all this. Oh, hey, you have this training to go to at 8:15. And I'm just like, what's going on? Now, hindsight 2020, 8.5 years later, it was a really awesome job, really awesome experience to be able to have transitioned into more of a performance based sales position. But for sure, to your point, they were all about like, no, dude, like you sell, you have sold, you've sold for years. It's a different type of sell. one might argue that ours was a more high involved sales. My role was more not necessarily transactional, but the sales cycle was pretty short. While as you're harboring a relationship with a high school student from the point in which they're a sophomore or junior as they walk up to you, at that Jacksonville College Fair or whatever other fair that was throughout the Southeast that we went to, and you might see that kid again like a year later, 2 years. Like it's just like they come out of the blue and you're like, oh hey, you talked to me, and you're like,
Who
yeah,
are you?
yeah. You're like, oh man, how's your family doing?
Yeah,
Like it's
exactly.
just it was a much longer sales cycle than what actual sales. I mean, with the exception of enterprise sales, like the sales cycle of our time was way longer than what we deal with now. I mean, or have dealt with in years past. So
That for me, when I effectively transition into a technical sales organization, right, after leaving Vanderbilt, that was kind of the difference. I was used to maintaining communication with prospects for so long that kind of transition kind of surprised me, just being how short the relationship development and maintaining those relationships tended to be. Now, obviously, we still maintain them because families that circle back and want to enroll with what I am involved with currently. That's important, but it was kind of a culture shock to me when I got out of working at admissions. Instead of having 2 and 3 year long relationships, I have several week and a couple months long in most cases. So it's
yeah.
been different, but yeah, I transitioning for me was unique because every single role I've had, even though they've been sales roles since leaving Vanderbilt, or being director of operations, they've all been relative to higher education, which I find
Hmm.
fascinating. And um, I think it really connects with me. But I think one of the things that is important to talk about is understanding how to talk with people. And
Hmm.
I've been really looking forward to asking you this because in my role now, I still deal with a lot of high school students and parents, and I also deal with executives at other organizations, maybe looking to do pairings with some other stuff that I take part in. And what is striking to me now in the nearly 15 years that you and I have both been doing this is I'm seeing a lesser ability of students to be able to actually converse and interact with me. Whereas I feel like when you and I were right out, they could come and hold a conversation. And now, and I've said this before, man, but now I get on meetings with students, 18-year-olds. I'm like, hey, how you doing, brother? And he's like, good.
Good.
I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
I'm doing great too. Thanks for asking. And it's like I don't understand if it's social media, smart devices being consumed all the time. It's kind of like sucking the life out of kids today. But are you noticing that too? I mean, even though you're not really in a student facing role, have you noticed that since you and I used to be so forward facing all the time? Do you notice
So
that at all in your current
yeah,
role?
so it's funny the way you just said like good. That reminds me of how my sister has 5 children.
Hmm.
The oldest is 12, and like all of them, when you ask them how school was today, they're like good. It's like
Hmm.
no context. So that's what I mean. Like that reminds me of this high school student that you're dealing with, and 100%. It's because there's too much porn on their cell phone. Like they
Hmm.
spend entirely too much time like on their cell phones in general.
Hmm.
But I do think that overall it was actually the way that people interact and buy has changed so much.
Yes.
So sure, like 100% social media. It's the way that individuals now just communicate. It is Instagram DMs. It's text messaging. But I would say as well, when you think about a lot of this stuff, think about the last few items that you've purchased. They've been on Amazon. They've been on eBay. I still go on periodically because like you can find some cool shit on eBay, but
Yes, you
like
can.
like you're like most of it is so uninteractive that you have generations that are basically being introduced like in their transition to what will eventually become adulthood. That's what that's what their interaction is,
Mhm.
like da- great case in point, Lindsay, my wife, is about 4 or 5 years younger than me.
You
When
dog.
we
You
yeah,
dog.
I'm a cradle robber. So when we first started dating, she actually got quite uncomfortable at the fact, or was like almost taken back a little bit when I called her, like because she was just so acclimated in the dating world of just like you text message people, you met up with them, whatever. And like I mean, I guess we were cut from a different cloth. But it was like I'd just pick up the day. Like I don't want to sit here and go back and forth with a text message. Like even some of my best friends still to this day like to just be like "Ba-da-ling, da-ling, da-ling, da-ling," and there's like 15 messages. It's like, dude, just pick up the fucking phone and call me. Like
Exactly.
I don't want to have this conversation over a text message.
Well, and
Um,
I'll misread text messages. Like I'm the
yeah,
world's worst about like, are they
yeah,
mad at me? Just
yeah,
from a text message. It's like
yeah,
I want to hear your tone and vocal inflection, and
yeah.
I don't know. I connect better with that, but I'm even seeing it now, man, in 40 and 50-year olds, right? Like I'm
Hmm.
36. I'm seeing it now in 40 and 50-year-old adults. Same thing. Instead of the kid saying good, it's mom or dad saying good, and then
Yeah,
or some COO, and
yeah.
there's no ability to interact. And what that's leading to, if I pay attention to that, normally like a lot of my initial calls, with a prospective client is going to be about an hour. I'm noticing that shrink. I'm seeing 35-minute, 30-minute calls now, and I'm having to adapt my delivery,
Hmm.
and that's been a growth thing for me because I'm used to spending the first 10 to 15 minutes with a prospect, having a cup of coffee, getting to know them, learning about what their needs are, not just trying to be some chump that walks in with his hair slicked back, bye 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 bye, right?
Mm.
So are
Yeah,
you, and you just kind of wrapped up a pretty good tenure with ADP. So
yeah.
in the later stages of your career with ADP, were you kind of seeing a similar thing where you were spending less and less time, having those conversations with clients? It was more direct and to the point, or has it always been fairly fluid and a longer dialogue?
It all depended on the industry, to be honest with you. So I mean, your more white collar professional realm, the cell phone was on the table. You know, we've talked about this many a times. It's something that
Mhm,
I ended many years ago was wearing an Apple Watch. Like
mhm,
I usually just wear like a normal watch now, but like the Apple Watch was like one of the worst things for like high executive level individuals, like white collar, C-level businesses. They're checking their email, they're checking their text messages the entire time that you're in the meeting. And so, I mean, like, honestly, in a lot of instances, I would have to like reel people in, be like, hey,
mhm.
man, pay attention. Like, we're here together. Like, don't waste my time by
Exactly.
just like playing on your phone the entire time. I will say the less clean around the ears you get with some business owners, the more like in depth there. Like blue collar was great because they would just be they're like you're giving them a solution to
Mhm.
something that they're nervous and problematic or having problems with. With like the higher end businesses, it's like you're pitching them value, but you're doing it while they already have something established. So like
Mhm.
they're more so like get to the pitch, tell me the numbers, do that. Or half the time, I mean, like I had larger organizations that I met with. Hey, Lindsay. Hey, Izzy. That I met with that like they sat there and like kind of like goofed with their phone the entire time that the meeting went, and of course like those went nowhere. Like even now, I will say periodically this world is so funny. You would feel like you had the shittiest meeting with someone ever, and they'd still turn around, like respond to an email 2 days later and be like, "Oh yeah, we're buying." It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like you didn't even pay attention to me half the time. Like, what do you mean? But I will say, I think that the more and more, you've got for us WebEx or Slack or anything like those, any types of systems that they're constantly interacting and putting out fires. This thing has caused everyone to kind of lose the tongue in their mouth, right? Like they don't know how to dialogue, they don't know how to really like deal with stuff or deal with confrontation face to face. Like I loved it when clients would call me and like cuss me out. Like, because they'd be mad about something else, right? Like, they're not mad. They might even be mad about something that's like our work related, but they would call and she's like, and they would immediately be like, hey, dude, chill the hell out. Like, I'll hang the phone up. And like, immediately, like, it would like, given, of course, those are specific individuals who I've had long relationships with that, I'd have people that would look at me like, are you really talking to somebody like that? I'm like, yeah, because otherwise the guy's going to cuss me out for the next 30 minutes. Let's get to the point. So, I mean, yeah, I do think that technology has slowly taken people's capability to communicate away that it started off with that child, like the younger generation. I even saw it towards the end of my time in admissions. I was over the dual enrollment program for several years, and so like I would interview kids because I mean like, hey, you're 15, 16 years old going into a college class. Yeah, like let's let's set some ground rules up so that you understand what you're getting yourself into. And like a parent would talk the entire time. And the
Yeah.
kid would just be like, it's like, dude, she's not going to be there like to hold your hand and wipe your ass while you're in this calc class. So like, talk, let's interact, let's get. Now, that was probably one of the coolest situations in that old job because of the maturity level that that kid would have like a year or two later. Like
Like
they
growth
would,
they get from it.
yeah, oh my God. It was like they just flourish in that moment. And they would, you know, come in and stop into my office and talk to me for 30 minutes at a time and talk about their plans for college. A lot of times they were going to you for their actual undergrad. And so it was just like, all right, cool, man. Like, this is great. Like, Farrell's my dude. You know, oops. Um, Continue. Yep. God, I screwed that up, didn't I?
You're good. No, you're fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
So
All right.
in
Cut that
terms
piece
of
out.
like making that kind of like approach with parents
Yeah.
when they're kind of dominating the conversation, I have found that, you know, a lot of times those conversations take the turn of, well, and I've got to be careful how I say this here, but it takes the turn of, hey, my kid has anxiety. And I'm like, does your kid have anxiety, or are you creating anxiety in your kid by you
Yeah.
dominating and doing everything over them, right? So as now that you have your own child, right? Like how, and of course it's easy to say what you're going to do as we get older, right? But how are you planning on pushing growth in your child as she gets older to make sure that she is confident, capable, you know, in her teen years, and she's not, you know, someone that's not going to be, you know, needing that kind of pushing constantly.
So as of right now, it's taking her everywhere we go.
Hmm.
Just if there are kids there, if there's adults there, like I think there's an emotional maturity that is lost in children being able to interact with adults
Hmm.
as well. So like other adults, like strangers and whatnot. So like, you know, we've already started. I mean, given she's a year old, so it's not like we're talking, you know, she's having conversations with anyone yet. But
Fair, yeah.
I think the idea of just giving that exposure to different people in different settings. We also try to avoid tech. It's hard
Yeah.
because, right, like baby screaming, 100% I have my AirPods in and a podcast going while I'm rocking her in her room to try to soothe her, you know, just to like, because my mind's going to explode if,
Sure.
you know, I hear another scream. But, you know, we've tried not to do like I mean, I know a lot of people do it, but it's like put her in front of Miss Rachel, put her in front of Coco Melon. Like, we're not doing any of that right now.
Hmm.
We might segue that in, but I mean, like, you know, I feel like even when we were younger, like you went outside and played. So like we
Hmm.
go hang out outside. As of now, we're like setting a ground, like a foundation now to continue as you know she grows up and
Hmm.
really just putting her in different circumstances with people. I think is going to be one of the biggest factors to at least keep her sociable um, going
Yeah.
forward.
I think I remember my mom and dad talking to me a long time ago about how I think they had me out with them when I was 2 weeks old or something like that.
Yeah,
And you know, I think that Megan and we try to do the same thing with our kids. And now having the third, you know, we budget, you know, purposely to eat out at least, you know, 2 to 3 times a month with the kids so that they can have that social interaction. They can be meeting people they don't know. They can be forced to order their own damn food. You know,
yeah,
mommy and daddy we don't order the food for even my 3-year old. My 3-year old is expected to, you know, look the server in the eye and politely request her meal, you know,
yeah,
and a lot of people, when they've heard us talk about that, I actually had someone kind of act like that was too much pressure on a child. It's like, no, because at the end of the day, I think the sooner that your child can do that, the more, or similar things, similar, you know, interactions like that, the more confident they become. And I'm trying to, you know, find myself, or not find myself, excuse me. I'm trying to push myself to, instead of being the fixer, trying to encourage them to fix it,
yeah,
right, themselves. And I think that comes out of the amount of interactions I've had with both students and parents' inability to communicate and create a relationship based upon too much social media consumption and God knows what else. But I mean, don't get me wrong, like I'm guilty of it. Like I've certainly put Baby Shark on when I needed to distract a kid for
yeah.
30 minutes before and just let it go. But we try our absolute hardest to, you know, avoid that and get them outside for sure. But what I mean for you, as you know, you've been in both, you know, the admissions world, the sales world, what is it that you are, trying to be thinking of to, prepare your kids for in the future? Like, have you and your wife talked about, things that you want to, bring into their lives at an earlier age, or is that still a little bit early in kind of that conversation for y'all?
So I think it's early, but in the same breath, we've talked about at least being open transparency when it or having open transparency when it comes to the idea of budgeting and financing, because I do
Hmm.
think that that is a reality that's also been lost. Here in the state of Georgia, they've actually talked about bringing a finance class or like a budgeting class back as a Carnegie unit.
Hmm.
But for years, that whole idea has just been lost on everyone. And it's like, all right, well, right off the rip, you wonder where some of the issues, not the issues that we have in the world when it comes to young adults coming out of high school, young adults coming out of college, and then how they live their lives later. Is just they lean on the lack of understanding on how to debit and credit, like running your personal life like a cash basis business where it's like what's coming in, what's going out at an early age. That's what I know we're going to try to do, just because like my wife, we talked about it. We went on a walk the other day and we talked about the fact that like she didn't really realize the whole idea of like how to budget, how to deal with certain things, until she bought her first house, in 2016. So oppositely for me, I grew up in a single parent household. My mom was like figure like you like, hey dude, figure it out. You got to work more. Like case in point, first year of undergrad, I lost a scholarship, and she's like, "Great, sounds like you need to pick up more hours at work." And I was
I love your
like,
mom.
"Cool, man." She's like, I mean, no, seriously. She's like, looks like you need to pick up more hours at work. At the time, I was bartending at a local country club, and yeah, I mean, I picked up more time, figured it out. Fortunately, like for us here, like I guess the state at the time was pretty cost effective per semester. So like I could pay for it relatively easily and also still live on my own and do all my things. But I mean, like, great case in point. Like, back then did not go out and get food. Actually, we had a house with four roommates and we were splitting groceries until I realized that I was splitting groceries with them and I was never eating the groceries because I would go to work. I bartended at like 5 o'clock in the evening until like 10 or 11 at night. Would go in, have a meal there, right? And then I would just like grab a cup of soup or something for the next day for lunch. And so it was like, why am I buying groceries, man? Like I can cut out like a couple $100 a month just right there. So again, like frugal mentality I had back then has helped in life later on because same deal. Second I took the job at the school, my mom was like, great, they offer insurance and benefits. You're off of all of mine. Like good luck in life, go forth. Like all everybody when they talk about like, oh yeah, I was on my benefits until or my parents benefits until I was 26 is like, oh, that sounds like a nice thing. Like my ass got kicked off the second I took that job. So you learn. And I mean, like, I don't know if Vandy was the same way. I know UGA was this way, but you got paid like once a month.
Yeah.
And like it
Hmm.
was the word, like you got that check after everyone took their bits and pieces of it. What you got left was like, hey dude, that's all you got for 30 days. So I mean,
Exactly.
it humbles you very quickly
Yeah.
in life. And so obviously like once we got to a point or once I transitioned to my sales role, that helped me, I mean, to maximize my profit. Lindsay, same way. She has continued to move up in jobs and maximize her profit. So I think it's the idea, those ideas, those basic ideas, I think is what we're going to instill in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Try to at least early on, because I mean, like obviously you still need to be a kid, but there
Mhm.
are life lessons that you can learn early on just to get that understanding ahead of time. So
I fully agree with you, man. I mean, you brought up UGA. I mean, it was the same thing at both UGA and Vanderbilt. You're paid once a month, and I have no problem sharing the fact that I was paid $28,000 a year before taxes, insurance, retirement, all that was pulled out. And and for me, it was the saving grace of that was living in Athens at the time. You had an apartment, and your rent was by bedroom, right? So my
yeah,
my rent was only like I think, and because I'd like to think of myself as a savvy negotiator with corporate apartment ownership group, I negotiated it down from like I think 450 per room a month down to 325 a month.
Nice.
So my roommate and I both paid 325. So and then we had minimal expenses for electricity and water, and the biggest expense was food and cable. And you know so that forced me to budget at a very early age, and then as more money came in, as I progressed in my career, it just stacked it up. But I mean, even you talked about your wife not really budgeting until she bought her own home until 2016 per se. My wife, I remember it was when we were still dating, and she'll maybe get mad at me for telling this, maybe she won't, but she kind of didn't have a lot of that budgeting experience either. And there's a moment she and I were sitting on my couch one afternoon, and all of a sudden she kind of freezes and locks up and grabs my arm, and she's scared. And we're just like watching Sunday, football. And she shows me her bank account, and there's barely anything in it. And it was because she had bought some tickets to fly out to Arizona for a family trip, and
Mhm.
she didn't check her bank account beforehand, right? And so, that was when she kind of had her moment of wake up. And ever since then, I mean, she's incredible. She runs our budget now. As tight as I am on the budget, she is really good with the budget. And I think one thing I'm hoping to do, and I would really encourage any parent out there, is teach your kids entrepreneurship. And the reason I say entrepreneurship, I'm not saying they have to be entrepreneurs permanently. That's not the goal of this. But when you can help your child start a small business, maybe if you have, a son, getting them to start a lawn mowing business, or, a snow shoveling business, no matter where you live, something that they can create a little income from, and then teaching them how to budget that money and, save and invest at an early age, that's a big deal. Or if you have daughters, and you can help them, create a business and a market for themselves in babysitting. I mean, my God, we struggle to find babysitters, and
Mhm.
it's that market is still basically, it's not even ever going to be oversaturated. So teaching your kids entrepreneurship, and understanding how to pursue and find income, find business, and then how to manage that income when it comes in. I think that's one of the greatest skill sets that has been lost, and I don't think it's being taught. Like you said, it's not being taught in schools today, and it definitely needs to be in terms of just the budgeting aspect of it. But
Mhm.
that's what I'm hoping to do is force my kids, and I will use the word force, to have that experience early on so that they don't stress later on, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. That's just a personal thing for me. But for I think moving and kind of changing directions here, you you've kind of gone through a recent transition, and being a new father, you made the decision to kind of step onto maybe some new opportunities. I know you're looking at maybe even starting something on your own. You've had that entrepreneurial spirit for some time now, but making that leap into not having a job right now, as you kind of start making the next steps into the next opportunity, how are you feeling, man? What are the feelings like right now in your head, and what are you doing to kind
Scared,
of stay
scared
centered?
shitless, scared shitless. I mean, my brain is buzzing and spinning 24/7.
Hmm.
So yeah, no, made, and the job had been great. I mean, 8.5 years is a long time to do it. Slowly, you started getting to a point where you felt a little more transactional and less interactive and relationship based, as like the quotas continue to excessively go up. And
Hmm.
so, for sure there were probably like a solid couple few years where it was just like, man, like there's got to be more to life than this. We
Hmm.
did have our baby. Obviously, that is a terrifying moment, or call it a year afterwards. Be like, hey, let's try some new stuff. But yeah, I mean, also exciting because I tend to get bored easily when it comes to things that become redundant. So I'm looking forward to changing up. But I mean, definitely, all while, I mean, given we're also closing on a new house in November. So like, that and selling this house, all while like all this is going on, it's just been utter chaos. So like really what I've tried to do is spend time with my wife and my daughter, right? Like I think you and I talked about that years ago when you first got into sales. It's like you just do it, right? Like the whole work-life balance, spending time with your family and your kids, you do it. If it means you get up earlier than you need to, you do it. If it means that for me, a lot of it was cutting the day at maybe 4 o'clock and then cranking it back out at like 7 or 8 when she was down. Like you just make it happen. You make those times that you can interact with them more valuable, for them and for yourself, obviously. But then also, like, you have jujitsu. I have, you know, walks and runs and lifting weights and
Bourbon.
bourbon and periodically attempting to play golf. Really, really like the just general exercise has been like my release. I've gotten to a point even when we go on like our simple walks throughout the neighborhood. We have a very hilly neighborhood. I throw a 40-pound weight vest on just to amplify it a little bit more. I've contemplated taking my dumbbells and throwing them under Charlotte's stroller, but Lindsay thinks that I would be a psychopath if I did that. It would be just like a little too far. So, for now it's been, exercise and then hanging out with the fam, which has been great. I mean, she is, as you know from your time with your children at this age, they show more and more personality and grow a little bit every single day. And I mean, when you're completely slammed busy all the time, you're going to miss stuff like that. But if you can, make the time to get it done, you'll be there to tag along as things go along. So
That has been my biggest struggle as a father in my sales career, because I love sales because of the relationships and meeting new people. That's just something I've always enjoyed, I think to my wife's chagrin. But with that being the case, it has definitely taken a lot of, important moments away from me. And trying to capitalize on the time that I do have with him is very important to me. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, man, is just to, remind guys out there, I don't care if you're 25, 27, hell, if you're 22 and you're dating and you're about to put a ring on it and you want to have kids, like start thinking about this now, about the types of routines you can develop for yourself so you can make time for the family. But when you make that time, by God, that is your time and nothing else should interfere with it at all. And I failed there. I was not making that time for a period of time, and it led to some challenging. It led to a challenging period in my marriage, and thankfully I have a very strong wife that was working through that with me and helped me see where I could be creating more time for myself, and that's made a huge improvement. And we always had a great marriage, but it got way better. I mean, it was rocky, to be fair, at one point, but it got incredible, best it's ever been once I kind of realized that, and with a lot of her help. But I think understanding that work is always going to be there. Now, obviously, there's moments in time where you have to hit certain deadlines, and that's just part of it. But when you're with your family, you should have no other distractions. And I think that's a good thing to kind of circle back and talking about when you're talking in your sales role, C-suite executives and people like that. It's disconnecting from technology is how you build those relationships, not only with people, but your kids, and your kids are the most important. And I'm actually in a habit now where I don't have my work email on my cell phone anymore. I check my email once a day, period. And now I'm not distracted. I only wear my Apple Watch, when I'm, working out, and I wear an automatic watch. Other than that, only reason I bring up automatic, you can buy a $30 Casio for all I care. I just have a
hmm
passion for the art of watches and automatic watches specifically. But I try not to be distracted. And if you look at me in photos, sometimes I kind of have a head tilt because I'm on my damn cell phone all the time. And so trying to put that thing away, trying to focus and be in the moment is something that is like, it's a constant, it's going to constantly take work. I mean, social media and modern technology is an addiction. Let's call a spade a spade. It is an addiction. We're addicted to it. It creates dopamine, outputs in the brain. So finding ways to pull away from that and keep yourself in the moment with your family, it's important. And I don't, I don't care how tired I am. If that's the time I set aside for my kids, and that's my kids' time,
Yep.
period. Suck it up, be the leader of your household and be there. Don't do what I was doing previously and sit on the couch and just say I'm too tired. Well, you're being a fucking loser if you're saying you're too tired for your kids. And I was being that loser for about a 4-month period of time in my life. So,
Yeah. No,
um,
I mean, I get it. And I've had to put ground rules on myself as well, because obviously in this last role, you were everyone's contact, right? They had your cell phone number. So like
mhm,
you would get I mean, I would have text messages late at night, early AM,
mhm,
3 a.m. CPAs texting me. I mean, like it was chaos. So there was a point where like, you use the technology to put your walls up, right? Like, so
mhm,
the do not disturb went off starting at like, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. And then
Mhm.
like it wouldn't cut on back again. It wouldn't come off of it until 8 a.m. the next day. And it was for me like a moment where like, because like to your point, the dopamine, you know, thrill that we get off of a message coming through or a like on Instagram or a text message coming through or a phone call coming through. If you can't see it,
Doesn't matter.
you're like hacking your own wires, and you're like, nah, dude, like I don't, at least in that time frame. So like, we started getting into watching shows together at night, especially after Charlotte would go down. We still do it a good bit. You know, being the hard realist, or like the, what's the word, what's my actual usage of things that I'm purchasing. Like we cut
Yep.
cable, you know what I mean, like we cut a bunch of stuff out of life in general that was just like, dude, to be quite frank, we did it for that reason, but I also did it because every time my wife would just watch HGTV nonstop and would give me like a new project. We've literally renovated our entire house. I don't think there's an inch that we haven't touched. A lot of it was inspired by just like HGTV just being on in the background, and it's like, oh hey, that looks cool. Let's do that. Like, you're making this thing get a little bit more expensive than it needs to be. So yeah, cutting stuff out like that, being purposeful with our time together, still having date nights. All of that is stuff that we've struggled with at first, for sure. Like when your baby's first born, it is wild. And then from there, um, hey,
You're good. Keep
so
going.
just knocked it. Oh, no, I'm just saying someone knocked at the front door. Um, hey, so train of thought back on it. Yeah, so struggling at first because it was a newborn and obviously like things were chaotic, but like obviously like as time's gone on and she's been able to be watched by other people, we also would do that whenever we could. So
You have to make that time. You do.
yeah.
And I mean, it's a sacrifice. I mean, a financial sacrifice to get those sitters, and but it's worth it, man, because you need that time, with your bride just as much as you need that kind of self time for yourself. And what are you one that puts a lot of value in routine? Like, do you try to get up and like follow a certain schedule in your day, have a set workout time, something like that, or do you just kind of take it where you can find the time?
So workout is take it when I can find it, but everything else it's been a routine. And honestly, this is kind of funny. So my time at ADP, when COVID hit, people
Hmm.
actually leaned a lot on us to figure out how. And by us, there I'm one of two. I was one of two reps out here in the Augusta, Georgia space. The other individual was someone I have known for 21 years,
Hmm.
give or take 20 years. And so, you know, we every day get up from our house and go out in the field and sell stuff, right? We're on the
Yeah.
phones, we're doing like, you know what I mean? So you have to be very purposeful in your routine,
Hmm.
just to mentally prepare for it, even if you don't have anything going on. So though during COVID, reps leaned a lot on us, but even like my wife has taken her last job, this current job, I'm sorry, is a work from home job. And so in that, she always thought it was weird when like I didn't have anything like scheduled for that morning. I would still get up at 6, I would still shower and have everything ready to go. And basically, given a lot of that job, you never knew when someone was going to call you and need you to come see them right then and there. I mean, that's just the reality of how that position was. But I mean, it is. I personally think like the small wins that you have just kind of build the ego up, right? Like your first successful accomplishment of the day is to make up your bed, and then it's to get ready for the day. And all right, man, you look good. Like life's good. Let's get things going. And I think just some of those small wins, as silly as it may sound, each morning in your routine really set the mode for the day. So I mean, yeah, no, I mean, I've been a routine person even in my current scenario. It is get up, shower, unless there's something I've got to do that morning. We've been dealing with some weird funky stuff with a plumbing issue at the house. Like I've been getting up and it's like before the sun comes up I'm dealing with it, but then it's time with the kid, get everybody ready, get going. I've been taking her to daycare every morning, for months now. So I mean, that's just part of our routine, and then you get to the grind after that. So I do think though that a strong morning routine, whether it encompasses every aspect of what you do each day, exercise is a great example. Sometimes that was one that would happen randomly.
Mhm.
I might get a run in the morning. I might, you know, hit a gym class in the afternoon, or I might, at 9 o'clock at night do something. Like it might just be lifting weights around the house, like just here at home. Just getting it in though is the most important part. So
Yeah, man. I haven't trained jujitsu in almost 3 years because I slipped a disc in my back so badly that I was
don't
having
do that.
trouble. Yeah, it was horrible, man. And it was no one's. It was a random fluke thing that occurred, and it's been, slowly just getting my back in shape to where I feel like I can successfully still do that and enjoy that because I love it. But I think the thing for me that has become so apparent to me is the need for the social in-person interaction with people because I've ever since I left Vanderbilt I've been, other than a short stint, I've been in an excuse me, an at-home position. I've worked remotely. At one point I was going back and forth to Dubai about every 40 to 50 days, but ever since Vanderbilt, for the most part, I've worked from home. And one of the things I've noticed is that if I'm not getting outside at a minimum, instead of doing my walks on the treadmill we have in the garage for like the winter, you've got to get outside even in the winter and,
Hmm.
and enjoy the sunlight, take that in. And Andrew Huberman talks about getting up in the morning and taking the sunlight in first 15 minutes, which I probably should be better about. But
Yeah,
my point is just
he
the,
knows
the
that thing. He knows that
mental,
thing or two.
just a few, right?
Yeah.
PhD and all. But no, but just the mental shift has been incredible. And I found myself recently where I was kind of keeping myself in the garage working out, not getting outside. So I'll lift in the morning. I get my lift in as soon as I get the kids in the car and the wife and the kids, get off to school and to work. I go ahead and do my lift right then. But I try to get my walk in several hours later. And I'm almost exclusively outside because I'm happier. Just to be
Yeah.
straight on, like straight up, it's just I'm happier. I feel more balanced. I don't have, and when I say mood swings, I've never been like an angry person, but I don't feel myself just getting like frustrated as quickly either by getting
Hmm.
outside. And then also just the human interaction too. I'm trying to, slowly make it a point now, instead of, my daytime stuff, if I'm doing follow up or something during the daytime, get out of the house, go to a coffee shop, and just having people moving behind you as I'm like working my laptop, that is stimulating too. I'd love to interact and be in person. But having that just people around me is another good stimulant. And today, actually, I have a good buddy here, Justin Shear, who is a honestly an incredible individual, former military, deployed to Iraq. Now he's a teacher here at a local private Christian high school. And, we try to get together now every 2 weeks and just have, man time, right? Like talk about,
Yeah.
hey, brother, like this is what I'm going through as a father. This is what I'm going through in my, my walk, with Christ. And, to me, I think I've missed the living hell out of that. And that's been a big win, man. So how do you try to incorporate like, you know, getting that kind of time as not just to yourself, but how do you try to get, time with other people into your
Yeah.
schedule outside of work?
Yeah. So I mean, similarly, I'll say in the job, it was very much so that's how life was. So I mean, like
Mhm.
I get cabin fever very easily, which is why I was kind of like the anti follow the rule person during COVID. Like I was out there like every day, like against all the rules that we had internally, but like 100%, like if a client was just like, yo, can you stop by and like look at something for 5 minutes? Like, yeah, I'll come. I mean, like, there was no incentive necessarily for me to do it other than just like human interaction, maybe get like a referral into another business. But like, I needed the human reaction piece of it more than anything. Cause like, I mean, the four walls will make you go crazy very, very easily. As far as outside of work, you know, like I mentioned earlier, my sister has a lot of children, and they're older now and they're involved in sports and whatnot. So, like in recent months, or at least recent month in general, it's been soccer season. So I've like, gone to their games and whatnot. Augusta's not a huge town, so you're going to run into call it 5 to 10 people that you know at any function that you go to, even if it's completely random. So those, at least during the weekdays, that's how I've been handling, life, and obviously like going to see buddies and checking in and whatnot, and grabbing a beer, grabbing coffee, or whatever it may be. Weekends, we've just been like, all of Lindsay's girlfriends all have babies around the same age. We're constantly doing stuff with them. It's almost like we went to a baby party, or a 2-year-old's birthday party yesterday, and it was like a little overload. There were probably, it felt like there were 30 children there, but I think there were probably only like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
But it just felt like 30 just because the volume. But so yeah, I mean, we're at a time in life, in a community where there's a lot going on in general. So that interaction has always maintained to be there. But for sure, like, she'll tell you, um, there have been so many moments where she's like, okay, we need to, like, I can tell, to your point, I can tell you're getting antsy and maybe a little agitated. Let's go happy hour somewhere. I mean, like, we took, the three of us, including the baby, went to a happy hour like 10 days into her being born. And I mean, like, call us irresponsible parents. I just call us like needing a mental break. But like, still we'll do stuff like that, just like, hey, we need a breather. We're going to go downtown. We're going to grab lunch. We're going to walk around. We're going to end up seeing people that we know. We might meet up with some people that we know, or whatever it may be. But yeah, I mean, those, I got to have human reaction, or else I'll just go insane. That's why we do what we do. So, I mean, but
Well, it's funny. It's funny where that need for interaction will take you, because you and I had a very unique experience. One time in Jacksonville, Florida, and before I, excuse me, before I kind of go into this, the first time that we met, I don't know if you remember this or not, was at the SACAT convention in DC. Okay,
was that the
and
first time we met?
that was the first time we met, dude.
Okay.
Yeah,
Love
and
at first sight.
and it was love at first sight, and hashtags had just become a thing on social media, and
Oh, yeah.
so we were all walking around at this convention in between sessions, because we were going to our sessions, wink wink, but in between sessions, and you're walking around telling stories, making statements, and going hashtag with your fingers. You're slapping your
Yeah.
your, your
Yeah.
middle and index finger of both hands together, hashtagging vocally, audibly, out loud. It was the funniest thing.
Yeah.
Just kind of that extroverted self, that confidence that you have. But one thing before I kind of go into the story here, you've always struck me as a driven person, and it's something I struggle with, and I'm definitely a very driven person, and to some degree, I think it's actually rubbed off the wrong way of people. So, do you find yourself ever feeling behind at all? Did you have a
All
goal
the
like you?
time.
Yeah.
I
So,
mean, I think that if any salesperson feels satisfied, I mean, I think I sent it to you on Instagram, or maybe you shared it on Instagram, but like
the
the
Andy
whole, like,
Priscilla.
yeah, like that you
Hmm.
feel 2% accomplished,
Hmm.
like 100%. Like that
Yeah.
is, if you're in a sales role and you are like, oh man, things are good, like life is good. They know that, like,
Hmm.
you're behind. Like,
Hmm.
that was always my mentality here locally, because with some of the competitors I had here that were more like mom and pop type situations, it was one of those things where it was like, all right, cool. Like, I need to be doing what they're doing and more. Right. Like,
Yep.
or like so it was get up early and start talking to people earlier, like make this many dials during this time frame. But like, you never, I don't know. I have my entire life, I am my biggest critic. I always have been. When
Yep.
I would get a in a class, it's like, cool, man, probably could have done better. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like everything in life has been that way. I don't know where it comes from. It's probably like I probably should go to therapy for it at some point. But at least in these roles, it's kept you constantly going. So it would be like, cool, you just crushed a massive year. You hit these goals. People are like, congratulations. And then it's like, oh, cool, I could have done better. You shouldn't. I mean, like, as terrible as it sounds, like in these types of roles, like, satisfaction is a short term feeling, and you're going
Yep.
right back to like, okay, great, where's the next thing coming from? So
Man, you nailed it. Like, for me, I think that's why we've always just gotten, every time we get together as a party, just because we see, I think, so eye to eye on that. It's I take it back to, my dad, both my parents being in sales, my dad, being with a company that was, he was a part owner in, and later sold, to Berkshire. But for me, growing up in that always need to hit numbers, always need to perform, that's just been, I guess, pushed into me naturally. And
Mm.
I mean, dude, I've seen it in people I've worked with. I've seen it in managers. They get frustrated because I'm like, you like that? I could have had another $250,000, revenue month,
Yeah.
and like, but you did great. I'm like, no, but like it could have been this, right? And
Yeah.
and some people just take that the wrong way, and then and for those that may be listening that has a spouse that's in sales, or you know don't fault them for that. It's who they are. They're driven to perform. And you're a competitor. You've been an athletic guy. I was an athletic guy. I'm still athletic, and I still, anything I apply myself to. It's not that I feel like I have to beat everybody. It's just that I want to hold myself to the highest standard because I don't want to slack off, right?
Yeah.
But the way I look at it now, and this affected me the most. And I'm going to circle back to unemployment for a second. When it affects me more than anything as a father. And one of the reasons I got disassociated with being present as a father is I got overly hyperly focused on providing for my family,
Yeah.
and to the point of where I was so stressed of the idea of not making the right income for my family that I would prioritize sales and not my family. That is a fight I'm still working on. But I think one of the biggest influences of that is, when I left Vanderbilt, I was working as director of operations for an organization in Dubai. Also was running sales for them there, and ended up stepping into a new role after that. And I was when I went from the organization in Dubai to the new role, within about probably the sixth week of working there, I knew there was a problem, because my training all but stopped. They had nothing for me, and there was a yellow flag, and I kind of got a little antsy, and by third month, I started asking some questions, and I was reassured everything was fine. And fast forward, I think it was either 8 or 10 months later, they laid off a third of the company. And in the feeling in that moment on a Friday morning at 9:30, I think it was November 1st, 9:30 in the morning, of failure, even though it was nothing to do with me. It was, the company just wasn't performing, and they didn't have the money coming in. They let off over 30% of the company that day. The only thing I felt was failure, and I felt like I'm not able to provide my family. And the fear of being in that position again, because I was unemployed for 7 months. The fear of being in that position again, I think, is where when I got my first position back in, it drove me to be hyper vigilant on performing, and that distracted me from my family. So for anyone that is going through that, or you're currently going through it to a
Mm.
degree, like just remember, it's not you're not defined by the income that you bring in. You're defined by the family that you raise, and by the relationship you hold with your spouse, which, again, I haven't always been the best spouse. I'm a work in progress, right? So it's something that I have to hold myself accountable to every day. And I'll be honest, like, I got to the lowest point where, I was having some pretty dark thoughts because I wasn't provided for my family, and
Yeah.
that was really, really hard for me. So
Yeah.
no matter what, no matter where somebody is, keep pushing, because you're not defined by your income. You're defined by being present for your family first and foremost.
100%. I think that that's like, obviously, like, same, like, my whole scenario wasn't necessarily expected. But it was like, okay, like you there's no point in dwelling upon it, right? Like, there's no
Hmm.
point in being upset about it. Obviously, you can be pissed off, you can be aggravated at the situation, as vague as all of it went down. And it's like one of those things where it's like, all right, well, what are you gonna do tomorrow? You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the whole, going back to the mentality of never being satisfied. Like, it is a tough behavior for the spouses, right? Like, it's a tough
Sure.
one to deal with, because it's like, again, I mentioned earlier, we've renovated the shit out of this house. And like, sometimes it's been like where, she's looked at me and is like, why are you doing that again? I'm like, because it's not up to my standard. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it's like, you just, it was the same when we would go travel. It's like we jam in. We just got back from Europe a few months ago, or a couple months ago, and it was one of those things where, like, we jammed in what should have been like 2 weeks worth of stuff in like 5 days. And it was just like, hey, we're going to, like, hey, dude, who needs sleep? Like, just let's get, like, this is your one time doing this, or like, one time right now, from a viewpoint of like where we are today. Like, go get it done, go experience everything, and move forward. And so I think the same in my scenario is just like, okay, great. Like, what do I like? I need to figure something out for sure. But like, I guess another thought process is different from when we were recruiters moving into sales roles is now you have the experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, so now you can hang, you know, 8+ years in performance-based sales and 5 presidents clubs on your hat and say, yo, like, let's talk. Um, but then also to your point, kid doesn't know kid doesn't know shit. They don't know that. I mean, like my mom, I think my mom, the most she ever made was like 50 grand as a nurse. You know what I mean? Given this was the 90s and like the early 2000s. So like inflation and whatnot, like 50 grand was actually, like not the worst thing back in the 90s. But so point being, like single parent with 3 kids, never remarried, like we did not have a clue. And that's the reality of things is like kids don't know. And as long as you're there, as you said, that's what they're going to remember the most of. And so yeah, for sure, we all still need to provide, we need to do our things, like, and make things happen. But like, they're not going to remember the 3 or 4 months or 7 months that things went down that way. They're going to remember the time that they got to spend with you, and then where things are when they're older. So
Yeah.
that's that.
Yeah. I agree. And just got to remind yourself of it every day, because I've forgotten all of it, right? Because I
Yeah,
just was focused
it
so much on
happens.
performance.
Yeah,
But
that happens.
so, I mean, I think kind of circling back because I got distracted there for a minute, but I think one of the reasons that you've always been at the highest level and that I've always been at the highest level is a natural ability. And when I say highest level, I mean highest level performance in our roles.
Yeah,
Is our, I would say, a fairly natural ability to meet and interact with people and kind of meet them where they are. And
I know
um,
where this is going.
I don't know how deep you want to go into this,
You
but
can go as deep as you want.
okay. So I don't remember the year, but so you and I were both in Jacksonville at the same time, and there was a big, I think it was a NACAC college fair,
Yeah, it was
and
at the Prime Prim Osborne Center in downtown Jacksonville.
I didn't even remember the name of the convention
Yeah,
center,
dude,
dude.
I have a weird memory. It's
Ugh.
actually a curse, but it works out really well. I don't remember the year. It had to have been circa 2012 or 13 though.
Yeah. It was a few years before I got married. I was dating
Yeah.
Megan. It was a few years before I got married. But so you and I had been good buddies for a while. We were doing our individual visits to our different high schools that day, and I mean, you've got like Episcopal School in Jacksonville, Florida. You've got Bishop McGinn, or no, that's Oklahoma. There's another school there. It's Bishop
The
something
Gaines
there.
School,
McGain
Bishop,
School, yeah.
oh God, I can't remember the Bishop School. A
So,
lot of
but
private schools and a lot of fun public schools. So you didn't go to the
yeah.
public schools. I went to the public schools. So it
Oh no,
was
I went to the public schools
did
too.
you?
No,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
Public schools are wild down there.
you're all over, and then if what is it, Orange Island or whatever, kind of that
Yeah.
community that that's off, kind of on its own island there. But did all that, and then you and I, it was a Friday, and it was the Friday before the big fair, and you and I
Yeah.
decided that hey, let's catch up.
And the fair was at like 8 or 9 a.m. the next morning.
8:30.
I think were we also both staying
We were
at
our
the Embassy
hotels were.
Suites?
I was at the
I was at
Hilton
the
Garden
Embassy
Inn.
Suites. Okay, there we
You
go.
were a mile from me in the Hilton
Yeah.
Garden Inn, and so we ended up meeting. We were going to get a drink and then get dinner, and so we were looking for a bar. And as we walked, we met in this kind of community
Posh
area, and
area.
there was an
Yeah.
outdoor concert going on. It feels like we were on a date.
San
Anyways,
Marco? Is that
yes,
called? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we're in San Marco, and we ended up going by a liquor store, and they had a bar, and I had never experienced that before. I don't know if you
Yeah.
had.
No, they don't have those in Georgia.
We don't have them in Tennessee, and I grew up in the alcohol industry. It's what's my family was involved with. But so they had a bar, and we got bourbon. I know that. I don't remember
Yeah.
what we got, but we went up, we got a pop. We both got doubles to start, which should have been this sign right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And we sat outside, and they were actually waiting tables at a liquor store.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, the music stops. It's dinner time, and then the walk starts.
Yeah.
Do you remember what happened when we eventually found a restaurant?
Yeah. So I remember us going to several restaurants and them not being able to accomplish. I think it was late. I think it was like 9 o'clock at night. right? Or
Yeah.
like it was, and they were everywhere was like, oh, the kitchen's close, the kitchen's close. We finally find this place. And I mean, it was like your normal bar and grill. I think I got like a Philly cheesesteak and fries or something there. But we
Yeah.
we ended up encountering the most interesting people
Ever.
ever, ever.
Ever. So the wait staff loved us.
Yeah.
Loved us. We sat at the bar because they
Yep.
didn't have, I don't remember if they had a table for us when we even walked in there, but we sat
Yeah.
at the bar.
There was bar. I think the bar was the only spot, which, hey, I'm never going to complain about a bar spot.
Never. Never. And so, especially as two single men, not
Yeah.
not going to sit at a table together probably. But go to the bar, sit down, and all I remember, and I don't remember how many pops I'd had at that point, let alone what were singles, what were doubles. All I remember is at one point we were cutting up with the bartending staff and the wait staff, and one of the individuals behind the bar, her arm goes right in front of me, and I'm sitting there drinking, and all of a sudden I feel myself leaning all the way over the bar, looking down at this tattoo that's across her forearm. Um, and it was captivating. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
captivating. Do you remember what her tattoo? This is what I want to ask you. Do you remember what her tattoo said?
So if I recall correctly, it was in a little bit of cursive. So it looked interesting, but it was, I think it was, she wants to date and I just want to fuck, if I remember
It
correctly.
was it was she wants love. I just want
Oh,
to fuck.
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
And for whatever reason, I asked her if I could get a photo of it. She was like, by all means, and she had that arm right
Yeah.
in front of me.
Still have
And
the picture to this day.
you do. I do as
Yeah.
well. I'll
Yeah.
have to share that here.
Yeah.
So in that moment, we're cracking up, and next thing I know, in like this is like right after that occurs, a young couple starts talking to us. They're like, "What's going on?" And I don't know if we had shared what her tattoo said or something, but they then asked us to come to their house with them.
Let me clarify. So
Okay.
we talked with them, and then we went to the bathroom. Or
Mhm.
I think both of us were like, "All right, got to piss. Like, let's go in there real quick." The dude comes in and is like, "Hey, I work for the Jacksonville Jaguars." Turns out he was
That's
a
right.
recruiter. He was a recruiter for the Jaguars,
Mhm.
and he was like, "Hey, it's my wife's birthday. We have a surprise party going on at our house. It's just a few blocks away.
Mhm.
You guys seem cool as shit. They're a bunch of teachers and counselors and stuff because they're all in education.
Which we
Do
didn't
you
know
guys?"
about at the time. We didn't know
Yeah,
there were
yeah,
teachers
we
going
didn't
to be
know we
there.
didn't know the details of that, but they were like, it's a bunch of coworkers and it's a bunch of friends. Like, you guys want to come hang out? And that, like now looking back, I feel like that's like, what, like there probably is an episode of some show where people went missing. That's
And we get
like
murdered.
literally this story.
Yeah. Mhm.
But in that moment, we were just like, I guess we had enough in us that it was like, yeah, dude, we'll go. So we're like walking with this couple to this house for a surprise party for his wife.
We show up, and everybody, if I like, I remember this very clearly. We show up, and everybody basically knew that we were random people because it was like surprise, and then like
Yeah.
everyone's like to the other people. But there were teachers there were teachers there from some of the schools that we had visited
That day. Yeah. And I think there may have been a guidance counselor there as well. I can't remember the details. They're fuzzy now, but yeah, it was basically like, oh, you guys work where? Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. They're like, what do you guys do? And we're like,
Mhm.
we show up to parties and crash parties. This is what we do. We make friends with people. We drink and we know things. That's what we do.
Yeah, it was just kind of a very unique night. And then of all things, they asked us to spend the night.
Yeah, they're like, hey, you guys want to crash? We're like, no.
No.
like
I've
this
got
is where the awkwardness goes.
Yeah, it was like I've got a hotel room. I'm good, thank you, and it's a safe hotel room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thankfully Vanderbilt was not cheap on their hotels, but
Yeah.
I just remember being kind of awestruck by this idea that they were asking us to stay the night there with all these other people, and then we made our way back. We walked, made our way back, and then I don't know if you remember this, but when I got back to my hotel, I got in the elevator.
I do remember this.
And there was a couple having some shenanigans, and we will leave it at that, in the elevator as I got into the elevator to go up to my room. So,
Like awkwardly with like a Powerade in hand, like what
yeah,
do I do with what do I
I
do
had
with my
stopped.
hands?
I will admit I had stopped to get a Gatorade, Powerade, and maybe a snack at the hotel pantry, as
Yeah.
all Hilton Diamond members will know I'm talking about, and to perhaps prevent the headache I was going to have the next morning.
Yeah. It came
to,
anyways,
it came
but
anyways,
yeah.
and I'm sitting there with in my arms. I'm like, oh hi.
Like
So, needless to say, I think I was exposed and more prepared for any kind of, tough sales scenario as an admissions officer than any other type
yes.
of role I've ever encountered. So, I mean,
Yes.
if you were a hiring manager, would you put an emphasis on hiring admissions officers from schools?
I mean, I used to say just F&B, like, because I think that F&B in general, you get exposed to a good bit. But yeah, like after that job, we can notch that one as well. I mean, I remember having a counselor in Atlanta who had a hardcore crush on me, and she was like late 40s, and like sent me like left a drunk voicemail on my phone one Sunday afternoon, and I'm like, what is this? So yeah, I mean, like I do think that
Seriously.
that job probably you know, it got rid of a lot of awkwardness only because there were so many awkward situations that you got put into. That like when it's just like, hey, you're sitting down and having a conversation, you're like, oh, I can do this, I can do that, that sounds great.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I definitely think that there's now a thumb up to college admissions
Mhm.
in a sales role, because it translates well. You've already got people who have been doing it and not getting paid properly to do it for so long. But yes, like you get everyone's backstory, every weird scenario, everything in the entire world in that role. Everything else you deal with in like actual like normal performance based sales jobs, it's just like, oh, okay, cool. Like,
I'm biased, but I think it is some of the greatest training ever to
yeah,
handle objections. You learn how to talk to people of every background, culturally, financially, religiously, and it's just the repetition you get because you're doing it 4 to 6 school visits a day,
mm,
typically anywhere from 5 to 100 plus kids at your school visit. Then you go to a college fair at least 2 to 3 times a week. The preparation of dealing with people and their expectations of you is uncanny. So I mean, I think, man, if I was in the position where I was looking for to build my team,
yeah.
I would definitely put an emphasis on college missions officer. So
Oh,
hey, if any of you that are listening to this are looking to make a transition,
do it. Yeah.
let us know how we can help you. So
Yeah, it's an activity game. I was sitting here just thinking about that as you were saying that, because I mean, like even at those college fairs, you're just you're doing the elevator pitch 300 times. Like it's just
300 times.
like, I mean, to the point where you'd lose your voice before the end of the day. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So it's definitely it teaches you so much of just like activity, 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 activity. So I think it did translate pretty well over
I think
to
for me, it just made me, I wasn't afraid of objections.
yeah.
Like it just, well, that's too expensive. Okay, well, look, here's other options.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're
Oh, I want to do this. It's like, okay,
mhm.
cool. It sounds like a terrible idea, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
exactly.
You know,
Let me tell
like,
you why that's stupid, right? And
yeah.
it's and I think too, and I know I already know this for you. I'm not going to speak for you. I want you to echo or tell me your truth here. But my my being such a direct personality has been more beneficial. And you were kind of talking about this earlier, right?
Hmm.
My being a direct personality after establishing a relationship, gaining trust and all that, but by being direct with people has done more for me career wise and sales wise versus uh, versus not. If I was beating around the bush, sugarcoating things, people don't want that, right?
Yeah.
They want to build trust with
100%.
somebody, establish that relationship, and then once they trust you, they want you to shoot them straight and cut the BS, man. And I think I learned that because I had no problem by the time I was at Vanderbilt. I had no problem looking a kid in the face and saying, cool. You want to come to Vanderbilt and you have a 1210 on the SAT. It's not happening. Right.
Yeah.
And parents would hate it. And it's like, look, it's just the standards are what they are. And, you know, it would elicit a lot of negative responses. And of course, I wouldn't deliver it harshly or hatefully or anything like that. I'd have to explain to them the reasons why it wasn't going to work, but I would at least tell them. I wouldn't beat around the bush. And while parents hated it at the time, I think it was good for their kids to hear because they weren't putting their hopes and dreams in something and getting all worked up for something that honestly wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think the benefit for me now is I'm not afraid to have those tough conversations when people, you know, want to bring up potential issues or rumors they've heard about, you know, my industry. And or heck, if someone is frustrated with something that I need to try to help solve, I'm not afraid to handle those sometimes literal vicious, you know, conversations that can come out of those.
Yeah. No, and I think mine was more program specific during my time. Um, it would be like, oh, I'm gonna go to XYZ college for my undergrad, and then I'm gonna come to medical school down here. I'm like, why? They're like, uh, my favorite question, why? They're like, I mean, I want to go there for like all the. You want to go there for the athletic programs? Like, are you a sports fan? Well, no, not really. I'm like, okay. You want to go there for the job shadowing opportunities? I'm like, dude, there's like 7 major hospitals down here that you could job shadow from that are probably going to be people that are going to be on the admissions board deciding whether or not you get into medical school. Is the math making sense yet? And they're like, oh, well, and I'm like, and going no further, medical school is expensive as shit. You want to also have like hundreds of like thousands of dollars of loans from like your undergrad and then go into medical school and do that. And they were just like, you're right. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, dude, just like I'm not making it up. They could be PAPT, any of those programs. Like it was always just like the logic behind, I guess because my sister was that kid, she went away to a school that we've mentioned to do her undergrad and then went to PT school. And I always just made fun of her about it because it was just like, why? Like, why'd you do that? But now, back then, when I was actually selling the idea, I think I maybe had my sister's image in my head. And I was just like, you shouldn't do this. This is dumb. But like, legit, it was, hey, man, what sense does it make to go out of state, spend a ton for undergrad if you're going to just literally come right back here and go to dental school or medical school? It's like, you're being stupid. Like you're not, someone didn't have that conversation with them at some point about profits and loss in life. And like, hey, cool. Like, do you want to start off at negative 100 or do you want to what do you want to do here? So I think that, I was always willing to have those conversations. It was a problem when they would bring me in for financial aid nights at some of the local high schools because I would just be like, all right, hey kids, like I know it's an awkward conversation. You need to ask your parents how much money they've saved up. Okay, great. You also need to apply for scholarships. And yes, student loans, last case scenario if you need to get it done. But it was just like, hey, it's awkward. Nobody wants to talk about it. Going back to it earlier, like kids don't know the money their parents make. They don't ever know it. Even I mean,
Shouldn't.
unless you have a boisterous, which I mean, like to each their own. But like if you've got somebody who talks about it to a parent, you're right, they shouldn't. But like, all right, cool. That's the point where you need to have those conversations. And for sure, I mean, like right after right after that statement alone, like every room went silent, and I was like, yes, I did what I needed to do. And I mean, like, it does make you have the conversations, the objections you deal with now are cakewalks.
They're nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
So
I mean, for me, man, it's just, there are moments in time I look back at that I call a former life, you know, dealing with all the stuff that we dealt with. And there are moments I hate from it, but
yeah,
there are moments I miss from it. And
yeah,
I will say that, I've honestly never worked harder than when I was in admissions, you know, having to drive back in the middle of the night, you know, get in at 1:30 in the morning, be up at 5 a.m. to then be back on campus for a programming event that he had to run. And now, you know, if you can, I can maintain relationships, you know, through email and cell phone and make a living for myself without that travel. I miss the travel. I love travel,
yeah.
but it takes a toll, you know, and I don't see how, respectfully, how people I don't care if I'm sounding respectful or not, frankly. I don't see why people stay in that industry for as little money as those folks are paid. Um, I mean, it's obviously out of passion, but I mean, it's difficult to have a family on that. And that was one of the biggest reasons I transitioned out, man, is I wanted, better life, for my
Mm.
wife and my kids, and that allowed me to eventually go into consulting and sales directly, and that made a huge turn for me. But the skill sets, I don't care what anybody says. There is no better training.
Yeah.
You might have to learn the new product you're going to sell, and the way they want you to deliver it, but the ability to connect and establish a relationship is next level. And I know people that cannot do that. They've been in sales 50 years and they cannot build a relationship the way that other individuals that have been in the admissions industry can develop a relationship in a matter of 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I think it's invaluable experience that I will always look back on and appreciative, with an appreciative
Hard,
mindset.
hardest job we ever had.
Hardest job we ever had, lowest paying job we ever had.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but well, brother, thanks for being here, man. I know
Yeah,
you've
man.
got a
Thanks for
lot
having me
going
on.
on. If people are looking for someone that can, really kind of drive a leadership team, a good sales trainer, someone that can motivate their staff, or maybe they're looking for a top performer that's been, on the President's Club of ADP multiple times, like 5 times now.
Bye. Yeah.
Where can people reach you if they think they might have a need or see value in bringing you on board?
Yeah, I'm not the best. I mean, you may not laugh at this. I'm not the best at email.
It's
I
okay.
mean, it's just the reality. Like, I feel like, again, the tongue in our head, the dialogue. It's not there.
Yeah.
Emailing's great. Tyler.Werrick, that's WERRICK at gmail.com. But honestly, my cell phone, 706-833-5889, is the easiest way to get a hold of me. And it's even post, it's ringing nonstop. Some of it's client stuff, but like, I take calls. I mean, it's the nature of it. You get so used to it over so many years of doing it. Like,
Hmm.
what's an email? Just call me. Like,
Yeah.
phone call, get it hashed out. But yeah, that would be the way that I would say is the easiest to get in touch. But yeah, and as well, appreciate you bringing me on today for this. Been looking forward to this for a while. So enjoyed it, and next time we're gonna have a bourbon while we do it.
We'll do it because I already have an idea for another one I want to
Okay.
bring you back for, and I want it to be our first boiler room episode where
Okay.
you and I go through tactics of certain situations on how to handle them, but
Yeah.
kind of make it like a more honest approach instead of the sugarcoating that I think a lot of organizations
Sure.
try to do today, just
Yeah.
shooting straight. I think that'd be a great episode for us to do together.
Holler at me.
So,
I'll be
all right,
there.
all right, brother. Well, thanks for being here,
All
man.
right. Bye, man.
Talk
Appreciate
to you.
you. See you.